My name is Nancy Parker. I'm 43 years old, and for most of my life, I thought silence was the same thing as peace. I don't usually talk about my family. Not because I'm ashamed of them, though. Maybe I should be. But because once you start peeling back the layers, it's hard to stop. There's a particular kind of bitterness that doesn't shout. It settles in slowly. It hides behind polite smiles at reunions, backhanded compliments at holidays, and conversations that replay in your head weeks later when you're trying to fall asleep. From the outside, we look like a normal family. A little messy, a little competitive, but nothing alarming. That's the lie families like mine tell best. I'm a single mother, have been for a long time. My son Liam Parker is 18 now, and he's the one thing in my life I've never second-guessed. His father left when Liam was 6. No scandal, no dramatic betrayal. He just decided parenthood wasn't for him and walked away. I didn't chase him. I figured pretending was worse than leaving. Since then, it's been just the two of us. We don't live extravagantly. I work in IT for the school district, steady, dependable, unremarkable. We rent a modest duplex. I drive a 10-year-old Corolla that groans on cold mornings, and I cook most of our meals at home. Liam never complained. He noticed the difference between us and his cousins early on the vacations, the gadgets, the expensive hobbies, but he never weaponized it. He never made me feel like I'd failed him. That's just who he is. Liam has always been quiet in a way that gets overlooked. Not shy, not withdrawn, just thoughtful. He's the kid who helps teachers clean up without being asked, who notices when someone's sitting alone, who walks elderly neighbors across the street, even if they're not related to us. He's never been flashy or loud, just good, deeply, consistently good. And in my family, that kind of goodness went unnoticed. My older sister, Rachel Whitman, has always been the type who reminds you how hard her life is right after showing off her newest luxury purchase. She has a way of making success sound like suffering. Her husband, Todd Whitman, made his money in real estate and treats anyone with a normal job like they simply didn't try hard enough. They have twin sons, Trent and Tyler, Liam's age. From the time all 3 boys were toddlers, Rachel made it very clear that her children were special. Not smart, not athletic, gifted. That was her favorite word. When the boys were 12, she leaned toward me at a family barbecue and said in that syrupy voice that pretends to be helpful, "You should really push Liam more. He's sweet, but he seems easily distracted." It wasn't the words. It was the tone. Like my son was a half-finished project I should have returned for store credit. Trent and Tyler grew into that mindset beautifully. They were competitive in the ugliest way, not playful rivalry, but constant one-upping. If Liam got an A+, they got an A. If he joined student council, they made jokes about how anyone can run unopposed. When Liam brought a science project to a family cookout, Trent rolled his eyes and asked if he'd Googled the whole thing. When Liam mentioned applying for scholarships, Tyler casually dropped how many offers they already had lined up. Over time, Liam stopped sharing his accomplishments around family. He stopped trying, and I let it happen. I told myself it was harmless. Sibling rivalry. Kids being kids. I told myself keeping the peace was more important than pushing back. What I didn't realize, what I refused to see, was that I was teaching my son something dangerous. I was teaching him that love from family was conditional, that being kind meant being quiet, that taking up space invited ridicule. By the time senior year rolled around, the damage was already done. Liam worked harder than I've ever seen anyone work. Late nights, early mornings, tutoring other students, fundraising for school programs. He earned a partial scholarship to a reputable state university and was named salutatorian of his class. In our world, that wasn't just an achievement, it was everything. Rachel's response, "Oh, how fun," she said breezily. "The boys aren't really doing the whole graduation thing. It's overrated. We're throwing a party instead. Real intimate. No congratulations, no pride, just dismissal." I swallowed it. For Liam. We picked out his cap and gown together, ordered his class ring, bought him new shoes, not expensive, just nice enough that he'd feel proud walking across that stage. I told him we'd go out to breakfast the morning of graduation. Take photos. Let it be ours. He smiled and said, "Thanks, Mom. I know it means a lot to you." That smile hurt more than any insult Rachel had ever thrown at us. Because I could see it deep down, he was already bracing for something to go wrong. And I hate that he was right. The night before graduation felt quieter than it should have. Not peaceful, just subdued, like the house itself was holding its breath. I let Liam stay up later than usual. We ordered takeout from the little Thai place he liked. The one that always forgot the extra sauce, but somehow tasted better for it. We sat on the couch with the lights low, a movie playing that neither of us really watched. He leaned back with his feet tucked under him the way he used to when he was younger, before the world taught him how to shrink himself. "I'm proud of you," I said casually at first, like it was just another sentence in the room. He nodded, eyes still on the screen. So I said it again and again, because something in my chest told me tomorrow would try to steal it from him if I didn't anchor it down tonight. He didn't gush, didn't grin. He just smiled, that small, careful smile I'd come to recognize as restraint. The smile of someone who doesn't want to hope too loudly in case someone hears and crushes it. When the movie ended, he stood up and stretched. "We should get some sleep," he said. "Big day." I watched him disappear down the hallway, his graduation gown hanging neatly on the back of his bedroom door, the cap resting on his desk like a promise waiting to be kept. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at it, memorizing the sight. Because some part of me, some instinct I'd learned from years of family gatherings and carefully worded insults, knew moments like that never stayed untouched for long. Morning came too quickly. I woke up before my alarm. The sky barely light, that gray-blue hour, where everything feels unfinished. The house was quiet, too quiet. No footsteps, no humming from Liam's room. Usually on mornings like this, he'd already be up, pacing, nervous energy spilling out of him, even when he tried to hide it. Instead, there was nothing. I heard a faint sound from the laundry room. Not movement, just presence. That thick kind of silence that makes your shoulders tense before your mind catches up. I followed it down the hall, every step heavier than the last, and that's when I saw him. Liam was standing there holding his cap and gown in his hands. They were covered in writing. Big, ugly letters, thick strokes from an indelible marker. Not messy, the way accidents are messy, but deliberate. Angry, cruel. "Dumb kid doesn't belong. Enjoy your participation trophy." My stomach dropped, not because of what was written, but because of how Liam looked while holding it. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He was just staring at the words like he'd expected them, like they were confirmation of something he'd been quietly preparing for all along. "I think Trent and Tyler came by last night," he said softly, not looking at me. I heard something outside, but I thought it was the wind. I couldn't speak. My throat locked up every word I wanted to say, slamming into the same wall of disbelief and fury. All I could do was shake my head. My first instinct was explosive. I wanted to storm over to Rachel's house, drag those boys outside, force them to look at what they'd done. I wanted to scream. I wanted consequences now. But Liam gently set the cap and gown down on the washing machine like it was already ruined beyond repair. "Let's go to breakfast," he said. I stared at him. "Are you sure?" "Yeah," he replied. "I don't want to pretend for people who don't care." So we went. We drove 2 towns over to a little diner with cracked vinyl booths and a flickering neon sign that said open even when it wasn't sure it meant it. Liam ordered pancakes like he always did. I ordered eggs and black coffee I barely touched. For 2 hours we didn't talk about the vandalism. We talked about his dorm room, about how he hoped his roommate wasn't loud, about how he wanted to learn how to cook something other than eggs. I watched him talk about the future like it was still intact, and it broke my heart in a way I wasn't prepared for. Because even in that moment, after everything, he was choosing peace over bitterness. When we got home, I turned my phone off. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want excuses. I didn't want Rachel's carefully constructed version of events that somehow always ended with her kids as the victims. I needed space. Time to let the anger settle into something sharper, something useful. The quiet didn't last. That evening, while I was washing dishes, my phone buzzed against the counter. Rachel's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then again. Then a text. "Call me. Urgent." Another buzz. "What did you do?" "The principal wants a meeting about harassment and vandalism." My hands froze in the sink. Harassment. Vandalism. I stared at the words, my heart pounding hard enough to feel it in my throat. That's when it hit me. Something had already started moving. Something I hadn't even touched yet. And the story Rachel thought she controlled. It was slipping out of her hands. I didn't smile. Not yet. But I sat down at the kitchen table, dried my hands, cracked my knuckles slowly, and waited for the fallout. Rachel didn't stop calling. She rang 6 times that night. Each time the phone buzzed, I felt a small, sharp satisfaction in letting it fade into silence. Not because I wanted revenge, at least not yet, but because I needed to understand something first. I needed to sit with the weight of what had happened and recognize it for what it was. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't kids being stupid. This was cruelty with the history. Around 10 o'clock, a number I didn't recognize lit up my screen. The school. I hesitated for a moment before answering, my stomach tight. Nancy Parker, a woman asked. Her voice was warm but direct, the kind that didn't waste time pretending things were fine. Yes. This is Mrs. Carney, vice principal at Liam's school. I'm sorry to call so late, but I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow morning. I had a very interesting conversation with our principal, Mr. Vasquez, regarding your son. My chest tightened. Is Liam in trouble? Oh, no. No, not at all, she said quickly. Actually, it's the opposite. A complaint was filed today by your sister, Rachel Whitman. I blinked. About what? She claims there's been some form of retaliation against her sons, Trent and Tyler. Retaliation. The word felt absurd in my mouth. We haven't even spoken since yesterday morning. Mrs. Carney paused. She believes you may have reported them for vandalism, but the thing is, the school received an anonymous tip earlier this afternoon. My pulse spiked. Anonymous. Yes. Someone sent in photos, very clear ones, of Trent and Tyler on your front porch around 2 a.m. last night. The timestamps were included. Ring doorbell footage, I assume. They also attached an image of Liam's cap and gown with the writing on it. I sat back hard in the chair. We did have a Ring camera. I hadn't checked it. I'd been too focused on Liam. Too focused on not making things worse. Somehow, someone else had already decided the truth needed daylight. Mr. Vasquez wants to meet tomorrow morning, Mrs. Carney continued. You, your sister, and the boys. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I'll be there, I said. After we hung up, I opened the Ring app with shaking fingers. There it was. 2:03 a.m. Trent and Tyler stood on our porch, hoodies pulled up, but their faces were clearly visible under the porch light. One of them held a black Sharpie. The other gripped Liam's gown, laughing, as if this were some late-night joke worth sharing. Just before they left, Trent looked straight into the camera and flipped it off. I stared at the screen long after the video ended. That moment, that stupid, arrogant gesture told me everything I needed to know. They didn't think there would be consequences. They never had. Rachel had always rushed in to protect them. Todd had taught them that money and confidence fixed everything. Or maybe they just genuinely believed people like Liam didn't matter enough to fight back. I barely slept that night. Liam stayed in his room. Headphones on, probably talking to friends, probably pretending this was just another disappointment to file away. He didn't mention graduation again, didn't ask if we were still going. It was like he'd already buried the whole thing. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I put on my usual button-down and khakis. Nothing flashy, nothing confrontational, the kind of outfit people forget 5 minutes after you walk into a room. That's what I wanted. I didn't want attention. I wanted facts. Mrs. Carney met me outside the main office and shook my hand firmly. Thank you for coming in, she said. Rachel was already there. She paced near the wall phone, pressed to her ear. Designer purse hanging from her arm like a badge of status. Her hair was perfect, her heels sharp enough to announce her presence with every step. She looked like she was heading to brunch, not a disciplinary meeting. Nancy, she said when she saw me, her tone artificially warm. I'm so glad you're here. This whole thing is such a misunderstanding. I'm not here for small talk, I replied calmly. Her smile tightened. Where are the boys parking Todd's dropping them off? Before I could answer, Mr. Vasquez stepped out of his office. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man whose voice could quiet an auditorium without effort. Let's begin, he said. Mrs. Whitman, Ms. Parker. The meeting room was small, one long table, too close, too intimate. Mr. Vasquez sat at the head, Mrs. Carney beside him. Rachel and I sat across from each other. Rachel launched in immediately. I just want to say, she began adjusting her sunglasses on her head. This entire situation is being blown wildly out of proportion. Boys will be boys. Mr. Vasquez raised an eyebrow. Are you saying the vandalism didn't occur? I'm saying if something happened, it was a harmless prank. It's just a cap and gown. It's school property, Mrs. Carney corrected evenly. Those items are rented. Writing on them with permanent marker constitutes destruction of property. Rachel's lips pressed together. And according to the footage we received, Mr. Vasquez continued sliding printed screenshots across the table. Your sons were responsible. Rachel turned to me, eyes wide with practiced innocence. Nancy, did you send this in? No, I said truthfully, but I do have a copy. Our front porch camera recorded everything. For the first time, she didn't have a response ready. That was when Trent and Tyler walked in. They strutted at first until they saw the photos, the timestamps, the frozen image of them, mid-laugh on our porch. Trent went pale. Tyler's jaw clenched. Rachel snapped back into defense mode. This is insane. They're kids. You're going to punish them over one silly prank. If they were under the influence while trespassing and vandalizing property, Mr. Vasquez replied coolly, that makes it worse. I'm calling our attorney, Rachel snapped, reaching for her phone. No one is harassing you, Mrs. Carney said. We're addressing bullying. Rachel looked at me, then desperation creeping into her voice. Nancy, be reasonable. Do you really want to blow up the family over this? That was the moment something inside me hardened. This isn't about family, I said slowly. It's about you raising boys who think humiliating someone on the most important day of his life is funny. And if protecting them no matter what they do is your definition of family, then maybe blowing it up isn't such a bad thing. Her mouth opened, but Mr. Vasquez spoke first. We will be issuing formal disciplinary action, he said. Suspension from school events, revocation of honors cords, and documentation sent to universities regarding character violations. Trent scoffed. This is stupid. Everyone does pranks at graduation. Then maybe next time, I said quietly, you'll pick someone your own size. They stormed out. Rachel followed, stopping only to lean close and whisper, you're going to regret this. But the tremor in her voice told me she already knew. And what she didn't know yet, this wasn't even the worst of it. When we got home that afternoon, the house felt heavier than it had in years. Liam was sitting on the back porch, hoodie pulled up, knees drawn to his chest. He used to sit like that when he was younger, when something hurt too much to talk about, but not enough to cry. He didn't look up when I sat beside him. The boards creaked under our combined weight, the sound loud in the stillness. They're being suspended, I said eventually. No graduation events, no honors cords. Universities will be notified. He blinked once, slow and deliberate. Then he shrugged. That's not going to change anything. I nodded. No, but it's a start. He finally turned to look at me. There was no anger in his eyes, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. I didn't want them punished, he said quietly. I just wanted them to stop acting like I don't exist. The words hit me harder than anything Rachel had thrown at me that day. For years, I'd told myself I was protecting him by staying quiet, by smoothing things over, by swallowing comments and redirecting conversations. Sitting there on that porch, I realized what I'd actually taught my son, that cruelty was something to be endured if it came wrapped in the word family. You shouldn't have to earn your place at the table, I said. Not in this family, not anywhere. He didn't answer. He leaned his head back against the siding and closed his eyes. I sat there with him, letting the silence stretch. This time it wasn't empty. It was heavy with things we'd never said. The following week passed in a fog. Liam skipped the school's end-of-year awards ceremony. He'd been recognized for academic excellence and community service, but he told me he didn't want to sit in a room full of people who would clap politely and then look away. I didn't argue. I just told him I was proud. At night, I heard him typing in the living room, the soft click of keys well past midnight. Sometimes I'd wake and hear him pacing the floorboards, whispering under his steps. He wasn't spiraling. He wasn't lashing out. He was retreating inward in that quiet way that scared me more than any outburst would have. I wanted to help him, but I didn't know how. So I did the only thing I could think of. I showed up. I started cooking real dinners again. Nothing fancy, but warm, grounding meals that filled the house with familiar smells. I left notes on the fridge, little quotes from shows he liked, or lines from books we'd read together years ago. Some of them were cheesy, I knew that, but he started tucking them into the corner of his desk instead of throwing them away. One afternoon, I dropped him off at the library for a study group. While I waited in the parking lot, I pulled a notebook out of my bag. On the cover, I wrote 4 words. You are not invisible. That night, I left it on his bed with a pen. The next morning, the notebook was gone. I didn't ask about it. I pretended not to notice. But a week later, I found it on the coffee table. It was thick now, heavy with pages, essays, rants, short stories, all of them raw, all of them honest. The first line on the first page stopped me cold. They laughed like it was a game. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just smiled, and that scared me. I closed the notebook and placed it back where I found it. When Liam walked into the room later, I didn't mention it. I just looked at him. The kind of look that says, I see you. He nodded once. That was enough. 2 weeks after graduation, I walked into the kitchen and found him at the table with a large sketch pad. Not the notebook this time, a full artist's pad. I hadn't even known he owned one. He was hunched over it, drawing with sharp, furious strokes. What's that? I asked gently. He didn't look up. A comic, kind of. About what? He hesitated, then flipped the pad around. It was rough, storyboard style, simple boxes, pencil dialogue. But the story was unmistakable. A boy mocked by his own family for being different. Twins who sneered and laughed. A graduation ruined. And in the final panel, the boy stood alone, holding not a weapon, but his story. You did this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged. It keeps me from going crazy. Liam, I said, this is incredible. He didn't smile, but something flickered behind his eyes, like a match catching fire. He kept drawing. Every day after that, he turned his words into images. Some were dark, some hopeful, all of them real. I watched as the bitterness in him began to transform, not disappear, but sharpen into something purposeful. Meanwhile, Rachel stopped showing up. She skipped Memorial Day brunch. The family group chat went quiet. My mother called me privately, her voice hushed as if she were sharing a scandal. She's embarrassed, my mother said. She says you turned the school against her boys. They vandalized Liam's graduation gown, I replied. That's what happened. A long pause. I just wish you two could work it out, she said finally. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, I'm not teaching my son that silence is the price of family. That ended the conversation. We stopped attending the usual gatherings after that. 4th of July, summer birthdays. I figured if the truth made them uncomfortable, then maybe they didn't deserve access to our lives. At first, the quiet felt strange. Then it felt peaceful. And in that peace, something in Liam began to grow. The house changed without either of us naming it. Not dramatically. There were no speeches or breakthroughs that happened all at once. Just a slow rearranging of energy, like furniture being moved in the dark. Liam slept more. Not in a depressed way, more like his body was finally exhaling after holding itself tight for years. He started waking earlier, sketchpad already open on the kitchen table by the time I poured my first cup of coffee. The drawings evolved. At first they were jagged, heavy lines, faces twisted with exaggerated cruelty. The twins in his comics always had sharp teeth and hollow eyes. The adults loomed in the background, smiling, clapping, looking away. It wasn't subtle, but it wasn't meant to be. It was truth stripped of politeness. I never hovered, I never critiqued. I just watched from doorways, learning how my son processed pain when no one interrupted him. One night I heard him pacing again. Not the restless, frantic pacing from before, but something else. Focused, intentional. I found him in the living room sketchpad, spread out notebook open beside it. They laugh like it's a game, he read aloud softly. But if I don't laugh back, I disappear. He looked up at me, then surprised, like he hadn't realized I was listening. I didn't mean to read that out loud, he said. I'm glad you did, I replied. He nodded and went back to work. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I walked into the kitchen one afternoon and found him gone, but the notebook was open on the table. A new page had been added at the front. Silence isn't peace, it's training. That sentence stayed with me. By the end of the week, his sketchpad was filled with cohesive panels, not random venting, but structured storytelling. Characters with arcs, pain with direction. He wasn't just purging anymore, he was building something. One afternoon, while I folded laundry in the hallway, he called out, Mom. Yeah, can you look at this? He held up a page, a single frame. A boy standing in a crowd while applause washed over him, but the sound bubbles were empty. No words, just noise. What do you hear when you look at it? He asked. I studied it carefully. Nothing I said. That's the point. He smiled, a real smile. Brief but unmistakable. The next shift came quietly. Liam started submitting his work to small online platforms, indie zines, digital art collectives. Nothing big. He didn't announce it, didn't ask for validation. He just did it. One afternoon, I came home to find a printed email taped to the fridge. We'd love to feature your piece in our upcoming issue. A raw, honest voice from the next generation. I stared at it for a long time. That's huge, I said. He shrugged. It's just a small site. I taped it back up anyway. A week later, he asked me something that made my chest tighten. Do you think I could major in art? I turned to him. Do you think you could? He nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I do. Then you should, I said without hesitation. He didn't reply right away. Then he let out a breath I didn't realize he'd been holding. Meanwhile, the fallout from the school meeting continued in quiet, uneven waves. Rachel withdrew further. According to my mother, the twins hadn't received the recommendation letters they expected. One of them lost a merit-based scholarship after the disciplinary note hit his record. Rachel blamed me for everything. She always would. No, I told my mother during one phone call. They did that to themselves. This time she didn't argue. Liam began volunteering at the local library's summer art program. He didn't try to be the cool one. He didn't lecture. He just listened. Kids gravitated toward him, especially the quiet ones. One day I walked in and saw a little girl, maybe 7, proudly holding up a drawing of herself as a superhero with a giant pencil as a sword. Liam high-fived her. "See," he said, "you're dangerous now." That night I stood in his doorway while he worked. "You know I said you're becoming exactly who I always hoped you'd be." He glanced up. Yeah. Not because of what they did to you, but because of how you responded." He smiled again. Then he paused. "But just so you know," he said evenly, "I'm not done responding." Something in his tone made me stop. "What do you mean?" He turned the sketch pad toward me. The antagonist in this new drawing wasn't faceless. It was family. A twisted, grinning aunt. Twin shadows with mocking eyes. A graduation cap defaced and discarded. And in the center, a boy holding a stack of paper like a shield. "They made me feel invisible," he said. "So I'm going to make sure they're seen." In that moment, I realized this wasn't just healing. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Summer settled over our town the way it always did, slow, humid, deceptively calm. Ice cream trucks rolled down the streets in the evenings. Kids rode their bikes until the sky turned purple. Air conditioners hummed in every window. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside our house, something was shifting quietly, deliberately. Liam's comics were no longer just reactions. They were structured, intentional. Every panel felt like it belonged to something larger. His early drawings had been sharp, almost frantic. Now they were controlled, focused. He wasn't just expressing pain anymore, he was shaping it. That was when I realized we didn't have to wait for karma. We could build it. The first public step came without fanfare. A local bookstore called Page Turner's announced a young creator showcase. It wasn't fancy, just a small community room in the back folding chairs. A projector screen that only worked if you tapped it twice, but it mattered. Liam submitted his work without telling me. I found out when a flyer showed up in our mailbox with his name printed neatly near the bottom. His piece was titled Muted Applause. The story followed a boy whose family laughed every time he tried to share something he was proud of. The antagonists were twins with perfect smiles and empty eyes. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. The day of the event, Liam stood in front of about 30 people, parents, kids, a few teachers, and introduced his work like it was just another story. "This isn't really about me," he said. "It's about what silence does to people. When you grow up around the wrong kind of noise, you start to think you're the one who's out of tune." The applause was real, unforced. It filled the room in a way that made my throat tighten. Afterward, a woman asked if she could feature his work on a youth advocacy blog. A man handed him a business card and mentioned he ran an after-school creative writing program. Kids lined up to ask when the next chapter would be out. I watched my son stand a little straighter with each interaction. The real turning point came later that night. We were eating leftovers at the kitchen table when an email notification popped up on my laptop. It was from the school district. Someone had filed a formal complaint about how Liam's situation had been handled not against us, but about the system. The district was forming a review board to reassess student harassment policies, and they wanted me to participate. They wanted me to share Liam's experience as part of their internal training. I hesitated. I didn't want to reopen wounds. I didn't want to drag Liam back into something he'd worked so hard to move past. But he read the email over my shoulder and said, "You should do it." "You're sure?" I asked. "They're asking you to tell the truth," he replied. "That matters." So I did. I spent 3 hours walking the board through everything, not just the vandalism, but the years leading up to it. The favoritism, the subtle digs, the way adults looked away. I showed them the footage, the photos, pages from Liam's comics. The director, a sharp-eyed woman named Tasha, leaned forward near the end. "Has your sister ever apologized?" she asked. I laughed softly. "She's not the apologizing type." Tasha nodded. "Would you be willing to submit this material to our new school culture initiative? We're developing a program on systemic bias and family dynamics bleeding into school environments." I thought of Liam's words. "I'm going to make sure they're seen." "Yes," I said, "use whatever you need." That was the moment the fuse lit. Liam digitized his comics and uploaded them to an indie platform under a username. He didn't use his real name. He didn't need to. Within 2 weeks, his first piece had over 8,000 reads. The comments flooded in. "I was this kid. Thank you for saying what I never could." Whoever those twins were, they created something powerful. I could see he was holding back, though, pacing between sketches late at night, waiting for something. It came unexpectedly. One evening, while scrolling through the local community group online, I saw Rachel's name. She'd posted a long, self-pitying status about how her family had turned on her for trying to discipline her sons, how they were being treated like criminals over a prank, how ambition was apparently being punished these days. I showed Liam. He read it once, then again, then stood up without a word. 15 minutes later, he came back with a new drawing. A wolf in sheep's clothing smiling at a crowd while whispering poison behind its teeth. Two hyenas laughed beside her, defacing a graduation cap. Beneath it, the caption read, "Leaders, not victims." "Post it," he said. And we did. The response was immediate and explosive. Tens of thousands of reads, shares, screenshots. People debated the meaning, speculated on the story, shared their own experiences with toxic families, protected by privilege. Rachel didn't know it yet, but she was about to, because the next comic didn't hide the metaphor at all, and Liam had a plan to make sure it landed exactly where it needed to. The thing about truth is that it doesn't need to shout. It spreads, quietly at first. One click, one share, one person reading something that feels uncomfortably familiar and realizing they aren't alone. That's how Liam's work moved like ink bleeding through paper, unstoppable once it found a crack. The comic with the wolf and the hyenas took off faster than anything he'd posted before. People argued in the comments about symbolism. Some thought it was about schools. Others thought it was about politics. A few guessed uncomfortably close to home that it was about family. Liam didn't correct anyone. He didn't need to. A week later, he showed me a rough layout on his laptop. A simple website mock-up. Black background. White text. Minimalist. The title sat at the top in clean lettering. Graduation Doesn't End Abuse. Underneath it, a subtitle, a comic series about sabotage, silence, and survival. "This is what I want to do next," he said. "All of it. In one place." I studied the screen. "You're sure?" He nodded. "I'm tired of breaking it into pieces." We bought the domain that night. We didn't announce it. Didn't tease it. We just built. Liam compiled his comics into a cohesive series, adding short reflections between chapters. I reached out to the youth advocacy blog that had featured him earlier. They agreed to promote the launch quietly. Rachel still had no idea. She was too busy repairing her image in private, according to my mother. She'd been telling anyone who would listen that the boys were victims of jealousy, that Liam had always struggled socially, that this was just bitterness dressed up as art. I didn't respond. The website launched on a Thursday morning. The homepage opened with a single image, a graduation cap scrawled with cruel words floating in darkness. Beneath it, a line of text. "This is not fiction. This is memory." By Friday evening, it was everywhere. Reddit picked it up first, then Twitter. Then a parenting podcast mentioned it in their weekly roundup. Messages poured in through the contact form, teachers, parents, former classmates, people who recognized pieces of themselves in the story. One message made my hands tremble. It was from a woman who'd once been part of Rachel's social circle. I recognized the twins instantly. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." Then another. Then 3 more. Liam didn't reply to any of them. He didn't need to. The work spoke for him now. Rachel found out the way people like her hate to find out by being excluded. It started small. A cousin unfollowed her on Instagram and reposted Liam's comic with the caption, "Support young artists who tell the truth." Then came the book club silence. The wine nights she used to host were suddenly happening at someone else's house. On Monday, my phone rang. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I answered. "You need to take that site down," she snapped. "Now." I let the silence stretch. "Everyone knows it's about us," she continued. "People are whispering. My boss's wife sent me the link and asked if it was true." "It is," I said calmly. "You think this is justice?" Her voice shook. "You're letting your kids smear our family." I think I replied slowly that Liam finally found a voice loud enough for you to hear. "They're losing opportunities," she hissed. "Housing reviews, scholarship evaluations. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said. "You're being seen." A pause. Then quieter, almost wounded. "He should have just told me he was hurt." "He did," I said. "You laughed." The line went dead. The fallout wasn't dramatic. It was steady. Scholarships were quietly reconsidered. Leadership roles quietly revoked. Rachel's long, defensive posts online were met with links to the comic and comments she couldn't delete fast enough. Liam kept drawing. He titled the next series Echoes After Applause, each chapter exploring a different kind of silence. Bystanders. Fake forgiveness. Adults who confuse peace with avoidance. One afternoon, a printed copy of his work arrived in the mail, hardbound, professionally done. No note inside, just a sticky on the cover that read, "For the shelf, for the next kid." Liam placed it in our living room between two old novels and didn't say a word, but I saw his hands shake. Rachel tried to regain control the only way she knew how, by rewriting the story louder than anyone else. She posted long, winding explanations online about family misunderstandings and how jealousy can twist perception. She framed herself as a mother under attack, her sons as victims of a culture that punished ambition. She implied Liam had always been sensitive, difficult. That art was just another phase masking instability. The comments didn't go the way she expected. At first, people were polite, then they weren't. Someone linked Liam's comic directly under her post with the comment, "Read this before you embarrass yourself further." Another wrote, "He struggled because of you." The post was deleted within an hour, but screenshots were already circulating. Damage control turned into damage exposure. One of the twins quietly lost his RA position at college after a housing review uncovered a pattern of peer complaints. The other had his student organization leadership revoked. No announcements, no public statements, just consequences appearing where privilege used to cushion everything. Rachel called my mother daily. "She says you poisoned the well," my mother told me during one of our calls, "that you turned everyone against her." "No," I replied. "The well was already poisoned. People just finally tasted it." My mother didn't argue this time. Meanwhile, Liam's world kept expanding. Nonprofits reached out about turning his work into a digital art series for student mental health awareness. A university professor asked if he'd consider submitting his comics as part of a visual storytelling symposium. None of it went to his head. If anything, it grounded him. He kept volunteering, kept mentoring younger kids, kept drawing late into the night. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I don't want to destroy them." "I know," I said. "I just don't want them to be able to pretend anymore." That I understood. Rachel and I crossed paths once at a distant cousin's wedding. She didn't look at me. The twins didn't look at Liam. We existed in the same room, but not the same reality. And that was fine, because when you stop performing for people who never saw you, you realize how much energy you were wasting, just trying to be tolerated. By the time summer began to thin into early fall, our life felt earned. Not perfect, not cinematic in the way movies like to wrap things up, but solid, grounded, the kind of calm that comes from choosing yourself again and again until it sticks. Liam finalized his decision to major in art before classes even started. He kept his scholarship. Art fell under the same college within the university, and he received a small grant from the school's visual storytelling initiative after a panel reviewed Echoes After Applause. When he read the acceptance email, he didn't jump or shout. He just closed his laptop, sat back, and smiled. A real smile, unguarded. That was when I knew the worst of it was behind us. He helped run the library's after-school art program twice a week. Kids flocked to him, not because he tried to inspire them, but because he listened. When they complained about bullies or siblings who mocked them or parents who didn't get it, he never minimized it. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, that hurts, but it doesn't get to decide who you become." One afternoon, I watched a kid no older than 9 draw a picture of herself standing alone on a stage, spotlight on crowd blurred. Liam crouched beside her and asked what the crowd was saying. "They're laughing," she said. "What would you want them to say instead?" he asked. She erased the bubbles and wrote her own words. I swallowed hard and looked away. As for me, I didn't expect anything to change at work. But a month into the new school year, I was called into a meeting with the district. They were restructuring student wellness tech programs and wanted someone with community credibility to oversee anonymous reporting tools and outreach integration. Apparently telling the truth clearly, calmly, without spectacle had made an impression. I said yes, not because it felt like a victory, but because somewhere out there was another kid like Liam whispering that something felt wrong and wondering if anyone would hear them. I wanted to be the person who did. Rachel and I still exist in the same extended family orbit. Weddings, funerals, occasional graduations. She never looks me in the eye. The twins never approach Liam. Their world shrank quietly after the noise faded, and ours expanded in the space it left behind. Our house is still modest. The Corolla still grinds on cold mornings. Liam's room is a mess of sketch pads, thumbnails, and half-finished panels taped to the walls. But the silence here isn't heavy anymore. It's peaceful. Liam's comic series now ends with a single final panel. A boy stands alone, graduation cap restored, inked in gold. Behind him, shadows whisper, but he's already walking forward, head high, pen in hand. At the bottom of the page, in small, steady lettering, "Story to be continued." That's how we won. Not by screaming, not by begging to be believed, but by building something so honest, so undeniable that silence finally lost its power.